do.
Hello, hello.
Hi, everybody. Yay.
All right. How does the volume sound? Is it loud enough?
Can everybody hear us? Yay. Okay. We have been spotted. I have the laptop, so for those of you that are chatting, you were chatting with me, even though it says Craig's name.
Yes, we have our
Yes.
we have the stream going from
Audio's
the
good.
joint account, which is our primary
Yeah.
YouTube channel, and Sarah's logged in from my older channel
Yes.
that I had before we met. But welcome to our second exclusive ArtistWorks live stream.
Yeah.
Where did my uke go?
You handed it to me, and I set it over there.
No, just it lives there. Let's do a couple warm-up exercises, just because. Now, before we get started into the theme today, the theme is, of course, talking about gear. You know, we're going to be talking a little bit more about pickups, what to expect when you perform, things that you can do to make that process easier for the sound guy, et cetera, et cetera. But I wanted to mention again, because I'm still seeing some of us that are holding way too tight with that left hand. Now, one of the big telltale signs, or one of the big things to do, is I'm reinforcing the jumping jack, the finger jumping jack warm up.
Yee.
What that means is if we're doing something like a G chord, all right. If people have the thumb in the back, again, you're making your finger stand way too high, and when you squeeze, you're squeezing way too much with these muscles here. So again, what we're going to do is really emphasize letting it rest on that index finger. So right about there where it meets your palm, not in there, but right about there. And what we're going to do, we're not going to squeeze hard, but we're going to make that shape, but we're going to take all fingers off the neck. And I'm slowly just going to put all the fingers back down. I'm going to do this for about 20 jumping jacks. But already you can kind of feel your forearm muscles start to warm up a little bit, because these are the ones that we're really tapping into. But what this emphasizes is having that leverage, having that resting spot on the side of your index. So there is support. Again, you can take any chord. You can do like a D minor, same thing, just off and on. Just, again, realizing that it doesn't take a ton of effort, and you don't need to have the wrist out there and pinch. Okay, so again, resting. And if this is completely a new way of holding it for you, then definitely, you don't even have to make a chord. Just all four, or all five fingers, I should say, off and on. Just, again, you can see my forearm muscles really kind of jumping up and down compared to straining that tiny muscle here. All right, so any questions on that before moving on? Oops. Okay, so let's try this. Now, talking about pickups at first, and again, we're gonna have a space at the end for any kind of questions that you guys might have, and if there's something that you wanna shout out at us, definitely let Sarah know. She's on the laptop doing the live comments. But one of the big things, pickup wise, is the difference between a passive and a active pickup. A lot of passives like the K and K pickup are used a lot in ukuleles. The way that it receives information, it really does kind of transfer the vibrations and then push it down. The biggest difference between a passive and an active is that an active will have a power source, where a passive does not. And that's why you will have a much stronger signal coming from your ukulele with an active pickup. And you can replicate that a little bit by going through like a DI box or direct input box or another kind of
I was reaching in case you needed me to hold it.
something like the DI, the direct input that we use on our travels is actually this LR Bags venue. And so it takes the signal and then gives a much stronger output, as well as being able to shape your sound a little bit more, like cut off the highs or push the mids. If you have an active pickup, it should be strong enough that you could go sometimes directly into a signal, into a mixer itself. A lot of times, if it's a bigger stage, you will have direct inputs scattered about because you will get a more uniform signal. But there's also different benefits from having an active versus a...
Have a couple questions, sweetheart.
Oh, yes.
So Chris Miller is asking, what about the Maisel pickup?
So the Maisel is an active pickup as well. You do have to charge it. It doesn't run on a battery, or it runs on a battery, but it's self-charging in that sense. So the Maisels are pretty great. For me, when they first came out, I didn't really like the tone that I was getting from the Maisels. Plus, I didn't like the idea of having to travel with a completely dedicated cable for that. Like, it just, especially when you travel a lot, you try to be as efficient as possible with what, especially because I bring all the camera gear. And I try.
We have a lot of stuff we carry.
Have a ton of stuff, so we try to minimize like the extremely one-use type of cables and whatnot. But the Maisel, I've heard some friends at NAMM this year that the new Maisels are actually sounding like head and shoulders above the older models. So that is something I do want to check out for myself to see. But they're not bad. Definitely for the active pickups, I do love the LR Bags 5.0. It's a nice full rounded tone. For the Canaleas that we use, they have their own in-house pickup that they use. It has like 4 different elements that, it's crazy. I keep asking to send them to send us the literature on that, because I don't know exactly what makes theirs. I mean, when they say it, it's like this crazy.
I know,
awesome thing,
Joe will explain it to us each time we ask, and we go, But the thing I think that I love about it's I guess a Canalea proprietary pickup. But the great thing about that is every venue we've ever gone to, when we plug in, the sound guy's like, wow, that's a lot of signal. So like it's a very active and very strong and good signal. But Eric had a question actually, which was, would the TC Helicon Plan Acoustic have this effect? Do you know that one?
No, but it's Phil. Uh-oh. Phil is having issues.
Uh-oh. No picture or sound. I wonder if he has the mute on, because everybody else says they can hear us pretty well.
Let me see. Let me take a quick look at this one.
So, Eric, we're taking a quick look at the product that you mentioned, just to check it out and see if it's, so that we can answer your question about that, because I don't think either of us have used that one, actually. But the thing about gear is there's always so much of it. You can never really try them all.
Well, that's when you spend like a whole day at Guitar Center.
Right? It's true.
And I used to have like so many friends at Guitar Center, because I would go and try all the different guitar pedals and everything. I'd bring my uke, and everyone's like, is that an ukulele? And then I'd start playing. And then it's just funny. We always drew like a crowd whenever we went to try out gear at Guitar Center. In Eugene, at least. Why isn't this loading? Let's see. So it looks like the TC Helicon Ooh, has automatic harmonies.
Ooh, oh cool. So it's an effects pedal as well as a DI? Eric just mentioned that it's very good for recording.
Nice.
It looks like a really cool...
And that's something that we'll get into too, because the thing about recording, there is a huge difference in the sound that you get when you're plugged in and the sound that you get when you're mic'd, like having a mic right near your uke. And that will pick up a much truer sound, acoustic sound. So what we end up doing is we end up plugging our ukuleles into our setup, as well as setting up a microphone or two next to the sound hole. And typically our producer will take like 85 to 90% more of the sound from this guy and mix in a little bit of the plugged in track to get more of that really true sounding thing. And that's something that I definitely learned along the way. Like I used to just plug everything in and it sounded a little synthetic, I guess, is the term I would use. But you could tell that it just didn't quite have that nice, warm acoustic sound that we were going for. But again, it's nice to have options.
And one other thing I like about the condenser mics is, especially if you're running like an open mic, I actually think some of the most successful sort of open mics happen when you just have a condenser mic. So you don't have to wait for people to plug in. It's really efficient, and it picks up everything. If you have it sort of in between the uke and the vocals, you'll be able to pick up both, and it is a nice, it gives you the acoustic sound, and it just amplifies that acoustic sound for you. So I love it when you know there's going to be a lot of people playing. Even I think we did a gig at Port Townsend a couple years back where there were so many performers. They said no one's plugging in. We have, I think there were 2 condenser mics, and they're like, that's it. Just go up, use mic control, and just play. And that actually was a really great show, and everything ran on time because there was none of this, oh, where do I plug in? Oh, is it this one, etc. So I love condenser mics. And even our friends Aaron and Nicole Kime, the Quiet American, when they do shows, they prefer to just have the condenser mics, which are pretty great. Yeah. Oh, and I think Craig is answering... I don't remember what kind of condenser mic that is that we have, actually. Which kind of condenser mic was
this
that
is the Rode NT2A. It's great. You can do 3 different patterns on it, but it was not too bad. We are probably gonna be upgrading our microphones later this year.
Yeah.
We have a standards album that we're recording right now, and then we're gonna be doing another big one later this year, and for that one I think we might upgrade the microphones and just have and again we're gonna be jumping around thought wise a bunch on this one because things are always kind of come up and everything kind of mixes. But with microphones itself too, we have the difference. We have a condenser here that we do mostly our studio recordings with, and a dynamic that we travel with. And typically you'll see these guys on stage like 99% of the time, even for like the most incredible performers on stage, they'll have this mic. They're just great sounding mics. This is the Shure Beta 58 Alpha, which I love. The reason why you'll see a lot more of these guys on stage is they're a lot more robust. Dynamic mics can typically take a beating compared to condensers due to the electronic difference inside. They're relatively or typically cheaper. And for the most part, they're just better suited for live performance. When you want that high fidelity sound, when you really want that full range and that dedicated sound, typically the condensers are the way to go. And they'll give you typically a little bit more range, but just a clearer sound. But again, not all mics are created equal, but that's the generalization between the two differences there.
And Diane had the question of, do you like it as much for vocals as you do for ukes?
The Rode?
Yeah,
yes,
the Rode.
Yes, we definitely do all of our, it comes with like this crazy anti-shake cage and the pop-up screen thing.
Yeah, I don't know if you guys can see it,
and,
but that's the little cage it's got.
But we do all of our vocals with this guy as well. And again, typically we have another version of this, and so when we do the ukes, typically we have two different angles near the sound hole to capture as much of that acoustic sound as possible, and we can always mix between the two tracks plus the plugin. And again, maybe 5 to 10% of the plugin is actually being used compared to the sound from more the acoustic capture there.
The only thing I will say about this particular mic, Craig doesn't have this the same issue that I do with it, but the P's and the S's, sometimes I have to be like extra careful with this particular mic, even with pop screen, because I just, for some reason, how I say my P's and S's really gets picked up with that particular microphone.
Awesome. It's great to see a lot of Shure mics. They make great mics, and there's a reason why they're so popular. I think we have the Chris, I think we have that tiny...
I think we might have the same little mic that plugs into your iPad.
iPad as well. We take that one with us on trips to do VEs and get a nice sound from that as well on the road.
And actually, when you see us do VEs on the road, we're using that little plug-in Shure mic. But also, we have this really cool clip, like a magnifying glass almost, or is that a fish? What kind of lens is that? We clip a lens onto the camera of the iPad so it has a wider view.
Well, yeah, it's just a very wide-angle clip-on lens.
I think it's put away right now.
Because unfortunately, like the iPads and the iPhones, the front-facing camera is typically very narrow. So here it is. So this is just a little clip-on
that's
wide angle for the iPad that we use. So it just goes around, clips on, but it allows us to show the whole instrument while we're doing the VEs on the road. And it's great for like FaceTiming family and stuff when there's two of us in front of the screen.
Yes. People are saying thank you for explanations. And thank you, Diane, actually, for mentioning the singing off axis. I've been trying to start doing that especially when I know that one of those sounds is coming up. But yeah, I didn't know about, you had mentioned the reduction demo thing, so I'll have to check that out. That's pretty darn cool.
And Chris, it is XENVO is the name of this particular one. The only reason why I got it, it was a Black Friday sale, and I bought like 5 for the family. And I think it originally was like $79, but I got it for like, I think $25, $27 on sale. So they're not bad. There's so many versions. And I think this is pretty much the same thing, just different off-brand brands. But yeah.
But it really works really well. Because we also have another camera we'll use. Because sometimes we'll have enough VEs that we divide and conquer. And so I'll usually get the iPad because I'm not as technically savvy as Craig. So Craig will have like the nice camera, and then I will have the iPad and the clip and the little mic because I can do all of that and do all of the trimming and everything.
I hope Phil finally got on. Phil, did you make it? Does it work?
Yeah.
Have you tried different browsers? We gotta type that in, I guess, huh?
Yeah, just in case Phil can't hear us.
Oh my gosh. No, so okay, microphones. Are any other questions about microphones before I kind of switch gears a little bit?
And even if you're doing even if you're filming your VEs and you don't have like this fancy equipment we're talking about, it's still fine. Like the main thing is making sure that you film horizontally and not vertically. That's the biggest thing. But yeah.
All right. Now, Chris had a question on email about using the Bose tone match. This is like a little mixer and effects system here, typically paired with their portable compact systems. So we have one that we take on the road with us. This is an amazing one if you're doing like vocals on uke, or even the two of us has 4 channels. So that's perfect for 2 ukes and 2 vocals. What's great is that it does have some amazing kind of preamp settings. Typically, if you have an active pickup on your uke, your gain is going to be, you want to dial it in a lot less than you would if you had a passive. If you had a passive uke pickup, you would need a lot more signal to boost to make it come out of the speakers at the same level. An active pickup already has a ton of signal going through, so your gain on this guy or any mixer, you want to, even though it says you're supposed to be a solid green when you play, we go even less, that it kind of peaks at a green, because there's so much there, and the ukulele has a tendency to sound really tinny when it's pushed really high. And that's typically the first thing we say to any sound guy that we work with at a venue is, please roll off the highs on the ukulele track. Because typically you hear not only the strings at the higher pitch, but all the vibrations at that frequency get exponentially louder when you plug in. So having them dial that down really starts to give you more of that mellow sound and just a truer sound that you would hear. So typically that's the first thing we say to any sound guy. Another thing we do too is if we have something like this with us when we plug in, we pretty much say, keep yours flat, your all your settings flat. This is the signal that we're, the shape that we're looking for, and then have them tweak from there. But this gives a better starting point compared to, because a lot of these guys at major music venues sometimes don't know how your ukulele should sound, so they typically skew it thinking that it's made more for rhythm and that higher pitch kind of sound, when a lot of times it's not the case that we're looking for at all.
And also too, sometimes when you have the gain too high, if they turn up your gain a ton, you'll hear a lot of finger noise, which is not the most pleasant sound. A little bit is fine because you hear some of that acoustically, but not when it's like when you're touching with your fingers, and that'll happen too when your gain's way, way too high. And we had a couple questions.
Yes.
One was...
well, you Maniac, definitely take a look at the Bose T1 tone match. Hopefully this... Sarah, hide your face for a second. Let's see if it focuses on this. There we go. So there's a ton of different settings. You can see there's reverb on this. This has everything that we typically need. There is even delay. You cannot input the delay speed like other dedicated delay pedals, but this has a ton going for it. And like I said before, the sound output on this is actually really, really nice. The preamps are beautiful.
And then another question, which is not this stuff related, is, are the airlines okay with the large Fusion carry-on cases?
With the Deluxe, yes.
Yes, so we have so far been just fine with the Fusion Deluxe bags. We've switched to the Urban bags because those are a little bit lower of a profile, even though the padding isn't as intense as the Deluxe bags.
Well, here's the thing: if we were to travel by ourselves, I would probably take the Deluxe over the Urban. The reason is, with the Deluxe, people can still see it in there. With the Urban, people will kind of peek and they might not see, because the Urban is much more thin, and they'll try and stuff a big bag on it. When we travel together, we'll do 2 urbans because they nest really well together.
Yeah.
But we've never had an issue, I think once in the last 7 years of flying with the Ukes, that we got a little bit of a argument about
Yes.
the instrument. But it worked out okay even then.
Yeah.
But the biggest thing is and this is when I first started was to act with confidence when you go on the plane with it. And make sure that your other carry-on can go under the seat in front of you.
Yes.
And the rule of thumb is, in the U.S. especially, if there's a room in the overheads for your instrument, they have to let you take it. If you're the last one on the plane and there's no room on the overheads, then it's at their discretion about putting it under. So typically, that's why Sarah and I always fly on Delta to keep that status, so we always board first. If we do travel on an airline that isn't a partner or anything like that, we typically will spend the extra $30 or whatever it is to get early boarding to ensure that we have space for instruments.
Yes. And then there's a couple other questions. Kenneth asked about, have we had any mic failures on stage?
Mic failures?
I can tell you one thing I've had happen, and still happens to me, is I'll be so into singing or playing a song, I'll totally hit my head against a mic and there'll be a thunk. That's always a little embarrassing. So I've had that happen.
Yeah, I've never experienced or seen any kind of mic failure before. Typically, it's the cable that will get that will be a bad cable. But microphone wise, I've never seen that happen live before.
And real quick, to answer Diane's questions of how do we deal with flying in Europe on non-American carriers, we always use a Delta partner. It might be more expensive, and the Delta partners we tend to use are KLM or Air France. Though they sometimes will still kind of give you a lip because of the status that we are with Delta, they tend to not mess with us. We did have one time, I think it was Qantas, which was not a Delta partner, but we had stuff happen where we ended up on a Qantas flight. They tried to do stuff, but usually we have been fortunate in that most gate agents are usually pretty reasonable. If you tell them this is how you make your living, and that the instrument is worth, thousands of dollars, which it is, they usually will try to oblige. It's rare that you run into that grumpy one that you hear the stories about.
Well, here's another trade secret. Typically, we travel with a bunch of individually wrapped Hawaiian macadamia nut chocolates.
Oh, yes, bribes.
And so sometimes we'll show up to the gate if it's not a partner or anything and explain the situation and kind of hand them a few of these chocolates, and they get so excited.
They do. They get really... So, yes, always carry a bribe.
Yeah.
Chocolates from Hawaii.
A little bribe goes along. And just
it really does.
Speaking of Hawaiian instruments, here's some Hawaiian chocolate.
Yeah.
But
it helps to grease the wheels.
Yes, it is amazing.
Yeah. Oh, and Teco, I have totally experienced the mic dropping slowly thing. Yes, where you're singing and then all of a sudden you're like going down with the mic. Yes, that has happened to us.
Oh my gosh.
And Phil had a question. And I loved Lisa's comment of, it's time for a private jet. I wish. But Phil had a question. He gets extraneous sounds from his strings as he plays, sort of like a whistle. With certain strings, it's worse and is not quite noticeable. Is it his oily fingertips? Or, well, I guess the question is, does it happen when you lift your fingers from the strings? Because sometimes...
Or when you're sliding, yeah.
Because sometimes I'll have extraneous noises if I have been pressing particularly hard with this hand and I go to lift the strings, because then the string sticks to my finger and then I inherently make a sort of pull-off sound. So is it that kind of sound, Phil? Or do you think it's from your plucking hand?
There's definitely been some times during hot summers in Eugene, Oregon, where the sweat would cause. It almost felt like when you're to do the wine glass and making the sound resonate from the lip. it almost felt like that because everything was amplified and picked up every little thing. So I really was so paranoid after that about keeping my tips dry as much as possible to kind of prevent anything like that from happening. It's great to see that I do love when Piper took her uke to Israel. That's amazing.
Yeah, and I'm glad that our advice worked for you, Piper.
Oh yeah, Rebecca does chocolates too.
Yeah.
And going back to Eric, I'll take a look at that the TC Helicon play that you have, because I'm very intrigued by that. And I'll see what I'd recommend, or if it's going to be just fine. But it looks incredibly capable. But I'll take a look later and write you back on that, just to, because I'm just not completely familiar with that particular one. But I definitely will get back to you on that.
And clay, yes. I've had the same thing happen at the beach. Sometimes it's moist. The moisture does make things squeaky. So it could be because England is a very moist place. I know where Phil lives. So it is possible it could just be that it is just really moist as well, which makes that squeaky sound happen too.
Now, also, performance-wise, and I know we talked to Diane about this before too. If you're ever thinking about doing open mics or small group performances or small solo performances, practicing being plugged in and practicing singing to a mic is just as important as practicing the song itself. I mean, it is a completely different skill set that you have to play with. Because especially when you plug in your uke for the first time and you put on headphones, you can hear not only is every good sound amazing and amplified, but every bad note, every weird transitional,
every slide you make,
you hear every little thing. So when I first started plugging in and practicing with it, I felt like I was the sloppiest player, because all of a sudden I heard all the things that
you heard all the mistakes
you typically don't hear acoustically. Yes. So that is something that we do recommend if you're thinking about that, investing in a kind of entry-level amp, and just use headphones with it. But you start to hear all the little nuances. But with the microphone, learning how to play with the mic while you sing is a completely different skill set in itself too. And the more you get used to having all these things like plugged in, this thing in front of your face, the easier it gets to be on stage with it as well. You always want to practice how you're going to perform. Another reason why we try to encourage people to get off of the sheet music. Right?
Yeah, but definitely spending time, the first time you hear your uke plugged in, it's going to sound like a foreign instrument, and it's not going to sound like you're playing it and you're going to mess up. I know when I was first plugged in, it totally threw me off, and all of a sudden I was just this bumbler on the uke. It was really, really difficult. So.
Oh, nice. Chris found the clip on 33 on Amazon.
So
nice.
That clip we talked about earlier is only $33 on Amazon. So those of you that joined us a little later, you'll be able to still watch this even when it's all done, so you can go back and rewatch what you missed earlier. And I think we've set up, there's a setting we did where I think you're going to be able to see the chat boxes too, which is exciting. I know the last one we did, we didn't have that. But what other gear stuff were you going to go into before I ended up moving you in another direction, sweetheart? Because you talked about microphones.
Gear-wise now, so just as kind of what we do for you guys, a little showcase. So when we travel, not only do I have my big DSLR for photos and video, but I do, for the nice VEs that we do when we have the time, typically I'll have a little Rode mic.
Oh, nice, honey. Diane just said, lighting and cameras!
And we typically bring like a tiny little tripod. So this will sit at the desk of our hotel while we set up the iPad and watch the VEs, and then use this guy to actually record with. The reason why I love bringing the DSLR for the video stuff too is, like, especially compared to like an iPad or iPhone camera, this has the low light shooting is in so night and day difference. I know, I'm so funny.
You're taking lessons from me.
I am.
With bad jokes.
But this is typically what we would do for really nice kind of VE setups. Lighting wise, because and this is another reason why we bring the DSLR everywhere compared to like an entry level camcorder, is that the low light, because the low light is so good, we don't have to pay attention to lighting quite as much for this kind of stuff. If we were to do something
like the iPad,
more important, then I have a couple options. Is that
what you need?
Is the hot shoe lighting thing in one of those drawers? Can you dig? In either 1, 2, or 3, I believe.
What am I looking for? This thing?
No, it's a hot shoe. It looks like a rectangle, kind of like a rectangle, and it has. Okay, I'm gonna switch with Sarah for a second.
Okay.
Hold on.
One thing that we have discovered with lighting, there's a couple of things. One of them is if you are in a low light situation, or rather if you have a dark background, put a light behind you, even if it's like a lamp, because that is going to at least give you definition from the background, and also having lights in the front. Unfortunately, we can't take this camera off the tripod right now.
At the moment, yeah.
At the moment.
I will. What I'm gonna do is I'm gonna do a little video in the next welcome video that kind of explores our lighting options and what we do for our kind of office here. Now, this is a nice travel LED light that can go on the top cameras, because again, cameras crave light. The more light you can provide, the better. So this is a nice, I think it's like $150 or something like that. But it runs off of AA's, but it lasts forever, and it's bright enough. You can get different color things on top to make it warmer if you wanted to, with like a more amber coat there. But, you know, again, lighting is so important for photography and video. So that's always a big thing for me. Now, when we do our music videos, or we do our interview videos, like you see in the living room a lot with like Calais, or who do we have? Daniel Ward recently.
All right.
Typically, you know, what you want to do is pay attention to shadows. So, for example, currently in our office right now, we have 3 lights, and they're all pointed up to the ceiling. Because they're floodlights. So if we pointed it down directly at us, you would get these harsh shadows that happen. So what it does is I'm shooting up at the ceiling, the white ceiling, and the white ceiling has helped bounce the light down on us to help create more of a uniform light. And so as you see from Sarah, typically if we do like a music video, or we do something a little bit more one-on-one, I'll have a primary light a little bit above her eye level, shooting down at her from a little bit off center, and then a secondary light in a big kind of light box. I'll have a secondary one maybe about 4 feet back on the opposite side to help fill in the shadows a bit. But you still want a nice strong light as your primary, to give it a little more depth, because if everything is the same range, it looks very bland. So to help create that dimension, to create that space, you typically want to push off 2 lights. And like Sarah said too, the background is just as important. So sometimes we'll have a light right behind us, facing the backdrop, to help create that separation for form compared to the background. Especially for people like me who have dark hair, that helps a lot with a dark background as well, so it doesn't just fade into the background.
Yeah, and the other thing too is that different facial features are going to be lit a little differently. Like, for example, Craig will set up lights and be like, okay, these look great, and then I'll step into the light and he's like, you've got all these crazy shadows, because I have a very sharp nose, I have a very sharp chin, So sometimes I end up creating crazy shadows on my face that make me look really scary.
And then, of course, we have to think about the reflections that you get from your ukulele.
Oh,
so a lot of times we
right?
have to play a little differently, a different angle,
Yeah.
so that it's not bouncing that light straight into the camera. So all these
Yeah.
little tiny things to think about. But I love that so many of you are diving into more of the editing, the video editing, the sound editing, multi-tracking. It's so much fun. And for me, that is my other passion besides music, is the multimedia stuff. And so I love audio production, I love video production, and I'm just very fortunate to be able to apply both to what we do. So I actually might have a couple lessons down the road about setting up like a little studio for either YouTube recordings or audio production. Unfortunately, they will have to be Mac-based because all of our stuff now is running on Macs. So
Sorry, PCs.
So I'll be doing a lot of Final Cut Pro or Logic.
And also about the reflections of the uke. So now when you watch the videos, the ArtistWorks videos, think about that. Because so many times, because there are 4 or 5 cameras on us when we film up at the ArtistWorks studio. And so before you even start playing, you have to make sure there's no reflection in each camera.
Yeah.
So sometimes we have to like change what we're doing. Or the other thing is that there are some camera angles where, the person filming us will say, you know what, because of the particular thing that you are doing, we can't get it out of that angle. Oh, yeah.
So rule of thumb, think about, so if the light's coming from the top, if it's hitting here, think of this as the mirror. So typically, we actually have to play down a little bit more this way, just a hair more than we're used to really get rid of any chance of reflection. And I do have a computer screen here that you'll see if I do.
Oh yeah, check that out.
So I mean, it is these little tiny things, right?
Yeah.
And then again, it depends on what we're trying. If we're trying to emphasize what our left hand is doing, we will hold it much more like this to get this closer to camera, and still see the right hand compared to. I mean, so there's so much behind the scenes thought process behind all of this.
Yeah.
And then we'll get into multi-camera shots, and so we'll have another camera set up where either I'll be behind the camera or Sarah will be behind the camera with a longer lens, like close up on the hands there when we do some of those shots. But it's a lot of fun, and I definitely will do a couple lessons down the road about more about this kind of process with that.
And Phil made the joke of, I have to worry about reflections on my bald head. Phil. But also, fun fact, the ArtistWorks things, before we'd start, we'd have someone powder our faces and stuff. So that actually is a thing, reflections off of your skin. So yes, Craig and I had so much makeup on for some of those because they just kept repowdering you through the day. And then we go back to the hotel after filming for, 9 hours. And woo!
Where is our
What you need?
custom high G?
I'll go grab it. I
Okay.
think it's in a case. And then Eric had asked us about these back here. We actually, those are foam.
Okay, so for our studio office here, we took the time, and so imagine those big. I have like a thicker padding one that's lining all the walls, and then we put even behind this curtain here it's like 2-inch thick. No, don't pull back, honey.
Okay.
Yeah, don't do that. Line the wall behind the curtain so there's even more padding. You want to get the studio as quiet as possible so there's no reflections from any of the walls. When we do set up in the corner of the ukes and kind of make a impromptu isolation booth with these panels. So we do surround the uke and the mic within that as well to really help prevent any kind of spillover or reflections or from the walls or from the floor even. So we have a small carpet as well. But that's the most important, especially if we don't have a lot of space to build a proper isolation booth. We have to kind of be creative in that sense of how we can create that absence of extra sound there.
Yeah, and the other thing I mentioned in the text was that the foam that you see directly behind us, they're actually on styrofoam boards, which makes it easy and light to be able to move and create those different isolation booths. And we have a friend of ours who put hooks in his ceiling and then made these kinds of boards that are behind us so that he can so they're removable, which is kind of nice.
Okay, now with Diane's question about do we ever wish we got Kanalea's satin finish instead of the gloss?
We almost
yes
did.
and no. The satin feels beautiful, looks beautiful, but Kanalea has one of the best gloss finishes in the business. So it's hard.
Yeah.
It's hard to just not take that off. And on stage, it really pops. But again, this is the finish on the high-end Kanalea's. Hide Sarah's face there. Sarah, no, other way. Yeah, there we go. So you can see that is all a sand inlay around the fretboard and the sound hole. And of course, the magical thing on this uke is that crazy sound port.
Which you see in the lessons, because it's one of the opening.
Yeah. So unfortunately, though, this is a much more brittle wood. And then we have a crack that's not
You can't really see it.
going away, but we're actually getting this one replaced this year.
Yeah.
But it just, and I just restrung this, so that's why it's all crazy and whatnot. But yeah, the satin finish is beautiful as well, but it's just so hard to say no to there.
Well, the thing I love about the satin finish is, I mean, it's not like you're gonna rub your face on the uke, but
She does.
But I do because it feels so soft. Like the first time I was like, oh my gosh, and I totally did this because it's super soft. One thing that Kanalea does that I think is pretty great is you can get gloss here, but a satin neck, which is awesome.
We should actually have them do that.
And then the other thing that I have heard about is I think Aldrine has, our friend who just does video work, he told us he has a satin one for some of the videos and then his gloss one for performing. So, pretty cool.
Now, for sound recording, so Clay, yeah, we don't actually build a booth. Like I said, we have our kind of impromptu isolation booth with the movable panels. And again, it's just a really nice, light styrofoam board glued on with those
Can we just grab one real quick?
panels. You could. So we kind of make a makeshift booth, but it helps having the whole studio already lined with 2 inches of this all the way around.
Whee! And then it's on the styrofoam, so it's super light.
And Eric, as far as our audio interface, we are using the Scarlett 18i8. I can't really show it in the camera at the moment, so it's all plugged in.
Do you want me to go grab mine? It's on my desk.
No, because
it is a different one.
Yeah,
but it's the same kind of.
It's not like an incredible high end one, but it has nice preamps and it does its job well. And then we just go straight into Logic on the Mac.
Yeah, and somebody earlier had asked about loopers and about effects pedals.
So effects pedals, so here's the thing that every ukulele player kind of does on their journey, and this happened with Jake even, where we start kind of acoustic, we start plugging in and we start experimenting with all these different effects, with delay, with reverb, with chorus pedals, with overdrive pedals and distortion pedals, and then every single one of us ends up going back to try and get the most acoustic sounding sound that we can achieve. But it's always the case. But I think we need to make that journey. You know, we need to kind of experiment and realize the beauty behind the ukulele is its own sound. I mean, yes, I can make it sound like an electric guitar, but it's so unneeded. but I think, like I said, like we all kind of go through that. But there's nothing wrong with a little delay. The thing I like about like the delay and the reverb is that it creates a fuller sound.
Yeah.
The really good um, pedals will enhance your sound to make it sound more like a live acoustic sound. Because you never want the ones that make it sound extremely digital in that sense. And actually, so if you can grab me the red one.
Yeah. The Hall of Fame.
Yeah, this is one that like Herbalta Jr. uses. We use this a lot too. But this is the TC Electronic Hall of Fame reverb pedal. And let's see if I can hide their face. And this guy is an amazing sounding reverb, and it's just the level. You just want a little bit of it, but it does sound very acoustic rather than adding these digital effects to it. So this is one I'd recommend to get a little bit more warmth and tone of your signal. Yeah, TC does make really good reverbs.
Mm-hmm. And then the looping was the other one.
And looping, so there's a bunch of looping pedals now. Back in the day, we weren't as lucky with so many options. The one I used to use when I played solo was the Boss RC30. Let me double check.
You don't have it anymore, do you?
I don't know. I couldn't find it earlier.
Oh, no.
Boss RC.
I'm actually surprised at some of the loopers that we've seen. They're really
yes.
simple, but they're like this tiny little thing.
Yes. Yes, there's the Boss RC30 twin loop station, and this was more than enough for what I needed. And again, if you're playing with the band or other people, there's no reason to use a looper. But if you're doing a solo thing and wanting to layer, it is a fun skill in itself. Just being able to start and stop the loop on time took a while for me, and I bombed horribly when I first started using the looper because I was so nervous on stage, and even if you miss it by like a quarter of a beat, it just sounds horrible when it reloops. And I think I was at the Milwaukee Ukulele Festival, and this was like 8 years ago or something like that.
Or more.
And it was the first time performing at a festival with a looper, and I completely mucked it up, and I had to like restart. But it was fine. But it's just one of those things that still haunts me a little bit to this day. But there are a lot of options out there. I know Boss has a lot more options as well now. The boomerang looper used to be one of the few loopers that could loop different sections of a song, like a chorus and a bridge, and save that within it. I know things have changed since then, but I have not kept up to date on that. Yeah. But loopers are definitely fun, and they are an incredible practice tool. So, for example, if you're practicing like soloing, for example, or you're practicing like a solo for Brown Eyed Girl, you can loop yourself doing dum 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 dum, and then it'll loop it, and you play. And you can practice your solos there, or you can practice your scales. Or I used looping a lot to practice my improv solos, to practice my different kind of runs and whatnot. So I'll just play the progression of the song that I knew we were going to play and just started creating ideas with it. Back in the day, I used to do the same thing, but I had that big red tape cassette recorder. And I recorded myself playing like the same progression for about 2.5 minutes, 3 minutes, and rewind it and play it back, and then practice over that until I ran out of tape. Then I rewind it again, etc. But looping now it is incredibly easy and good to use, especially if you want to practice plugged in. So that is a great option to have.
Yeah. And then Teco just asked, what about adding beats?
What do you mean adding beats?
I think like the loopers and stuff that have actual like rhythm things.
There are drum machines that are actually kind of fantastic, and then like they'll have like fill buttons and like ending buttons, so like it's not just the same thing over and over and over. And it's gonna be as complicated as you want it to be, but
I have a hard time actually doing a looper because you have to be, it's almost like you have to hit the pedal just before the beat, the downbeat, because you want your track to start on the downbeat. So I actually am very retarded at, because I haven't practiced at all, I'm sure. I haven't practiced any of the loop pedal stuff just because I haven't needed to, thankfully. But it is a skill in and of itself. If you watch somebody who's really good at looping, like Kale Gamiao or Jake, or is it Aiden James? He's really fantastic at looping. I'm always really impressed because that is a skill I do not currently possess.
yeah. So I mean, drum beats. I would say is something fun to try out. But if I was to add something, it would be bass lines, honestly, with a uke. That's to me what's really important to have. Because with the percussive stuff, you can get away with just adding more stuff to your strumming, even if it's just simple. But to me, you can do a lot of percussive elements already within the plane itself. That I think having either a dedicated rhythm track or some kind of bass line, if possible, would be an incredible difference between the two.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. And Aileen just said, Boss RC3 loop pedal.
I think there's a 3 and a 30. And the 30 is the twin, I believe. And the 3 is the single. Yeah. So the RC3 is the single loop station pedal. And the RC30 is the double, which has like a dedicated stop. And yeah, it's really not really worth the extra money for a second pedal, but for me it helped. It made it a little bit easier for me to use. Lisa, that's amazing. That like there's so like a lot of the guitarists are so, they're doing so much more than just playing music. With everything that they're doing too, it's just absolutely incredible. Yeah, Eric, there is one with like 5 pedals. It is insane. Phil, the Korg rhythm machines are awesome.
But I like that he's like, I have to have a PhD. But the thing about that though, Phil, is that with technology's amazing. If you're using it for practice, just get a drum machine app, because on your phone or tablet, instead of a metronome, sometimes I'll play to that just because it's more interesting. So
I forgot to mention another thing that we travel with are tuners, and as you can see, they're typically, if it's a, we don't have to be incredibly accurate. We use these tiny little Diodario micro tuners that just pop on the back here, and so they're kind of hidden, which is kind of nice. And you can point them down at you there. The Peterson strobe tuners are going to be the most accurate ones. There's a stomp pedal as well as a clip-on. And these guys are just way more accurate.
Yeah.
So again, the ones that
this
we do...
is the stomp pedal.
Yeah, and again, we talked about how we try to travel as efficiently as possible, so that one does not come with us anymore. It used to, and it's just everything
But then when
weighed
these
so much.
came out, it's like it's so much smaller and it's a lot easier. And plus, all this does is the tuner. It doesn't do anything else, and that's like, that's a bunch of
I think this one actually acts as a DI as well.
It does, but I mean, because we carry the LR bags, it didn't make sense to bring this too, because the LR bags has the strobe tuner as well as wait, it's not a strobe tuner, is it?
This one?
No, the LR bags.
No. This one is the only.
But the LR bags has a very good tuner in it, and it also like mutes when you hit it. So does this. So they kind of do similar things, which is why we don't carry this anymore.
We should sell these guys already.
We could.
I forgot we had them. But we collect so much random things, and again, it's all situational. So sometimes we need like a full blown setup with us when we travel. Like sometimes we provide like our own sound equipment. But most legit venues that we play, everything will be fine. We just bring our DIs and cables, and that's it.
I don't know. That was in the bedroom, hon.
Oh, was that Alexa talking?
Hold on. Alexa, stop. I don't know.
Alexa was having a chat with herself in the other room.
Yes. I don't know if anybody else has this. I call it the spy device. Oh, geez, you just set this one off. So I don't know if anybody else has one of the Amazon spy devices in their home.
Oh, no.
But all I
Alexa.
know.
Alexa. Alexa, stop. Oh my God. Okay, I'll just
Unplug it.
Yeah. Okay.
So ours have just been randomly going off throughout the house. So it's been interesting.
Oh my
Sorry,
God.
guys. That was an impromptu thing.
Yes, and another reason I like the micro tuners too is that they live on your uke, and it can be in the case and it doesn't get knocked off.
Yeah.
And compared to like the other clip-ons, it's very easy to just always have. There's also a tinier one that goes on the inside here, but I don't like having stuff there.
What
as much.
worries me about the one that goes on the inside is that if you forget to take it off, with all of the traveling and stuff that we do, we just pick up our case and throw it on our backs and stuff, and I can just see it like getting loose and wreaking havoc on the inside of the instrument, and that just kind of scares me. Because I'm sure you're supposed to take that one off when you're not using it. This is so nice because you can just...
Bye, Diane. I'll definitely have more of a lighting thing in the next welcome video.
Yeah. Bye,
so.
Diane! But yeah, but I definitely love this too because a lot of times we like the Kanalea logo. We think it's really pretty, and our other tuners would totally just go right over it. And they also just don't... When you get back professional shots from like the people and there's this like giant tuner on your headstock, it just doesn't look as professional. So it's nice to have these little sneaky tuners.
Okay, two more things I wanted to talk about that we travel with. This guy is amazing.
It's wonderful.
It's the best like 25 bucks that you could spend.
Yep.
So it clips on to the pole of like the mic stand, and you tighten it and it holds your ukulele like so, or it also holds a wine glass perfectly.
Yeah, because it's nice and round. It's amazing.
But instead of carrying like a floor stand, I mean, this is so much smaller and compact.
Yeah.
And it just it's saved our butts so much on stage. I highly recommend if you perform at all, get one of these. They're just amazing to have. Another thing. One type of humidifier or another. For those of you who live in typically dry places, you need a humidifier. Anytime it drops under 40%, you are risking a little bit of your ukulele to either crack or your fretboard
to shrink.
I mean, there's so many things that you have to really watch out for. So this guy kind of slides in between the strings here. And it clips on there so it can live in the case. But there's a ton of other humidifiers. This just happens to be the one we currently use.
That one's made by Oasis, but D'Addario has a variety of them. And I know there's more of them out there. We like the kind that hook into the strings the best because it's actually going in the instrument. But...
Yeah, I mean, and the thing is, especially when you buy something like an ukulele that's made in Hawaii, where it's really humid, and then you go to like Arizona or Utah, and the thing will just self-combust. And, it's really important to take care of these investments. And when we talked about the fretboard shrinking, like literally the wood for the fretboard would start to condense and the metal would stick out. And that's why you have sometimes sharp edges from the frets, because over time if it doesn't have enough moisture to be set, it will come in, but the metal doesn't shrink with it, so the metal still sticks out at the same length, and that's where you get that really sharp feel sometimes.
Yes, and also, if you notice that your fretboard has shrunk, do not despair. You can actually bring it back, bring it back to life.
To a certain extent, yeah.
Right, because remember, wood is a living, breathing thing, and it will expand and contract. And so, on occasion, especially if we're doing gigs in Arizona, we'll get a towel and very, very lightly dampen it and put it over the fretboard. That way the fretboard will soak up some of that moisture and we won't have the frets get all sharp because it shrank. Mm-hmm.
But yeah, those are pretty much all the things that we carry uke related when we travel.
Yeah.
Of course, some cleaning cloths, microfiber towels do the trick really well.
Yep. And also with the gloss finish in particular, not like the other kinds of finish, but gloss finish, you can actually wipe it with a lightly damp cloth. Like if for some reason you, I don't know, sneezed on your instrument and it hardened and you needed something to get it off. Like
that was so gross.
Which has happened to me. I hate to admit. But you can lightly dampen a cloth and then actually do that and then dry it all off immediately after. So, but if it's like a French polish, I talk to whoever made it, but high gloss finishes, you can actually, that's part of why I like the high gloss is it can take a beating and it is really easy to clean and you don't have to be as careful. You should still be careful, but not as.
Chris, as far as cleaning the fretboard, what I recommend every time you take off strings to restring your uke, use that microfiber cloth. So you can use just water if you want, or a damp cloth, or like the lemon.
There was a lemon oil that Joe uses.
That a lot of guitarists will use for theirs as well, just to get some of the grime out. Mm-hmm. And again, there's a pH difference in the sweat and the finger oils that mine will tend to build like a different color than Sarah's.
Oh yeah, it is an interesting thing.
And in Brian too, it had the green.
Yeah, it's like a kind of greenish tinge that happens to the frets on occasion.
Yeah.
And mine is more of like a white tinge.
So it isn't just, but even though we still recommend doing one string at a time we take it off, you can still do that section of each fret to wipe down. But it is something you do want to maintain it if possible. Whenever you change strings, I recommend changing strings. If you play a lot, at least once every 3 months. For us, we try to do it once a month.
Yeah.
But we play a lot. When I used to play like 5 nights a week, I used to change my strings every about 2.5 weeks. I would go through them a lot, and you could hear the difference. You can feel the difference. Think of it, time it out with your oil changes. If you get an oil change, change your strings. You can even do it at the oil change place. You can change strings. It'll be amazing.
Yes.
It's a good icebreaker.
The other thing too with changing your strings that I like to tell people is if you have your instrument, if you can get a finger underneath the string and kind of go down the string with it. If you feel any divots, you gotta change those strings because your intonation is changing because the divot is allowing the string to stretch more than it should. So you gotta change them for sure. And also, another reason we change our strings so frequently is that there's a battery inside of our uke, and the only way to get to it is removing a string or two. So that's something in order to ensure that we always have strong and good signal. When we change, when Craig, bless him, changes our strings, he also changes out our battery as well.
Okay, so a couple of things to look forward to. I'll start planning out a couple lessons about audio recording, video recording, editing later this year. We're going to be trying to do a couple of live streams of some of the festivals that we'll be attending this year as well for you guys. I'll do a new welcome video soon talking a little bit more about lighting. And I'll do a little handheld scan of the office and give you a better view on that compared to the stationary shot that we have currently.
I also want to, I was thinking of doing this for badges, but this actually might be really good for these sessions is sort of a let's transpose and learn how to transpose. Because that I think would be a lot of fun for one of these live sessions as well. Just so that if there's a song in the curriculum and you say, well, I like You Are My Sunshine, but singing it in C is hard, you can transpose it, put it in another key, and then you'll be able to sing the song.
And we did want to say an extra thank you to everyone who has commented on other people's VEs.
Yes.
And it's always so nice to see that encouragement. I think that's one of the special things about this instrument in general.
Yeah.
Is that I feel like there's way less competition and more about just sharing and wanting to allow the other people to share that same passion that you have for it and to encourage other people to push themselves. It's just a fascinating and wonderful thing to see whenever we get these notifications. So thank you for putting the time in.
Yes.
Again, let us know if there's anything in particular that you want to learn more about. We'll either do a live stream or do a lesson or we'll do a new welcome video. We're experimenting and brainstorming so many ideas at the moment to really make this ArtistWorks community here such a special place to be. And I think are there any other questions before we call it a day for today?
Yes, today, for the rest of our day, we're actually going to get to play with our nephew. We're babysitting. He is 1.5 years. So it's rainy outside, which kind of stinks, because that means, unfortunately, that we don't get... I was hoping to run him, take him out for a run. But unfortunately, unless I want to bathe him off, I don't know if we're going to get to go for a run. So we'll be having a lot of fun trying to keep him busy at our home for the rest of the day. So
if you have any other questions, and we talked about pickups, we talked about what we use on stage, but if there's anything that we missed, definitely let us know in the forums.
Yes. Forums are the best place because I always get notified there. Shoutbox is not always the best place because sometimes like stuff will get posted and then it'll end up way at the bottom just because that's like at the moment, and I don't get any notifications for the Shoutbox, but I do for the forum. So, yeah.
All right.
Thank you guys
so much for joining us. Thank you guys so very much. We'll do another one of these soon.
Yes, and we'll play next time.
Yes. Yes, we'll definitely have a jam for the next one, as well as some other exercises and whatnot. But we'll definitely have a small jam together. It'll be fun.
Yeah. All right, guys. See you next time.
See you soon. Aloha.
Yay. Oh, how fun.